Okay, right. Okay. Hello, Phoenix. Dumelang, dumelang. Hello, hello. Hi, Sonto. Let me just invite Clement. Dumelang, welcome everyone. Dumelang, good afternoon. Oh, I think it's good evening. Lekai, hey Nepsi, hey Pat. Okay, there goes Clement. Nice one. How's it, Auntie? Ella, how's it? Just waiting for a guest. I just sent through there. Rara,
Abuti.
Lekai.
Kimonati manwena.
No, I'm all good. Firstly, you can see me. I think I can see you.
I can see you quite clearly.
Okay, even my big head.
Yeah, I can see you quite nicely. Yes,
okay.
You are visible nicely.
Thank you very much. Thanks. We have 25 or so people that have joined. So maybe let's just say hi to the people in the meantime, and then we shall start.
No, thank you very much. I think first and foremost, let me just thank you for inviting me. And I think this is long overdue and it is timely that we have a forum like this where we can actually come and discuss some of the real issues that people are actually struggling with. And I just want to thank everyone who has decided to join us in this discussion. And of course, we will try to do justice to some of the things that will come up. But I must put out a disclaimer. Whatever we are discussing today, it is not discussed from an expert point of view. Neither am I projecting myself as an expert of anything that will be said today. But it is general overview of the difficulties that people are experiencing as far as people who are in romantic relationships are concerned, and the laws that really monitor their relationships when they have children and so forth. So basically just a general discussion, and certainly hope that it will be able to assist as many people as we possibly can reach.
Indeed. Thanks a lot, Clement. I think that sets the nice context and a nice into it. But for everyone who's come in, thank you very much for joining. I know it's a Thursday, you have other things to do, but you've decided to spend your data and your time to have this discussion with us. So I'm Dumi, for those who don't know me. I'm kidding. And I am joined by Clement, who's a good friend of mine. We went to Wits together, and Clement has done incredible things in his life. And one of his scenes is he's a director of Marumoagae law firm. He's also a senior lecturer at the School of Law at Wits. Clement has 2 LLMs and other. I've lost count. I mean, he's really CV is quite one to look at, and maybe also Clement. Thank you very much for coming through, and more importantly, making time and really just to empower people. For me, these conversations really, as you correctly said, it's not legal advice, but rather a more empowering session. We are here to share and see what we can do, and more importantly, give people an opportunity to ask questions to the extent necessary. Juanita, I see you. Good evening. Welcome, Bongani. Welcome. Someone asked me to pin these discussion. I can tell you with certainty that I do not know how to do that, but this conversation will be on my IGTV thereafter, and you can always share the link and download and watch thereafter. I think we can really just get to it. There's 35 people who've joined in, and you know, with time not being on our side is going to be that. But Clement, once again, thank you. Matrimonial law, or what they call family, or maybe I'm really confusing it, is quite an interesting type of law. You know, we get to see it sometimes when suddenly it's a good time in a marriage or in a relationship, and before you know it, you want to leave and things have suddenly changed, and there are certain consequences that come with it. I mean, some of those relate to issues of cohabitation, which, you know, it's a known thing and people understand it. And some is when a marriage suddenly has ended, such as divorce and stuff like that. But, you know, from an introduction perspective, and really I'd like for you to just guide this discussion, instead of just really getting at the end of the discussion. How about you just do an intro onto, you know, this concept of law in terms of what family law is, what, you know, various branches in it, and then we can select one or two topics that we can focus on, bearing in mind that we don't have an hour or so in this thing. So for people who are saying, I need to pin this, tell me how or where, and I'll do my best to do that.
Thank you very much, Tumi. Let me just correct something.
Yes.
Previously, I used to have a law firm. That firm, it was met with its own destiny, and it was closed. And I'm now part of the firm called Rambeva Murabani Attorneys in Pretoria. That's where I'm actually practicing now. But quite correctly, I am part of that university. That's where I'm teaching currently. In relation to what you have just said, it is true in most instances. You know, law, we try to put it into compartments. And unfortunately, one of the compartments that we try to put law in is what people refer to as family law. And even in universities, that is the heading that is used to teach a certain content. They call it family law. But really, while one can argue quite comprehensively that there is such a thing as family law, you find that there is a lot of divisions or aspects within this thing called family law. And what we are going to try to relate on or to rely on today, it is just a simple aspect of it. I often call it relationships law. I always often call romantic relationships law, you know. And I think what matrimonial law is exactly that, you know, where two people are in a relationship, and it can be that they are married or they are not married, and there are certain legal requirements that really should be met in order for their relationship to attract some legal consequences. And one of the most usual way of attracting legal consequences, of course, it's marriage, where people get to be married and everything is fine. But you find that during the course of their lives, there are so many things that happen that it leads to them no longer being able to live together. And they decide to part ways. And now we move from matrimonial law, we move into divorce or separation law, which is an aspect of family law. So while we started off trying to capture this essence of family law, which I doubt anyone knows, including me, everybody knows what it is, because there's so many variables. You can see that you move from one aspect to the other. So now when you get into this divorce law, that's when people separate, that we have a lot of challenges that really require legal or even courts intervention. And that's when courts have to interpret and declare some of the rights that people have and really pronounce on them so that they can actually exercise them and get what they believe they deserve. And I think that's what we are going to focus on when a relationship has gone bad. What are what are
I
the
mean, you call it
legal,
what it is. It's exactly that, because it's
what
gone
are
bad.
some of
And
what are some of
yeah,
the legal remedies that are available to assist people who wants to assert their rights? It can
yeah,
be a property right, it can be insurance right, it can be monetary rights, and of course, just to have a sense of where do you stand when your relationship has went bad. I mean,
yeah,
yesterday I had a client where she, she was involved with a particular man
yeah,
for years, and they were not married. Now the man has died,
yeah,
and you find that they bought the house together where the man was residing. The lady had another house.
yeah,
So now you find that at the time of the death of this man, the family members of the man, they come in, and now they are saying, look, you guys were not married. Everything in
yeah,
this house belongs to our son, and you are not going to get anything. So now I'm
yeah.
busy with that kind of situation. This is just to show how nuanced this thing that we call family law can be, and
Correct.
some of the challenges that can arise. Sometimes it's not people who are not married. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's people who are married, who are staying together. And you
Mm.
find that after the marriage has actually broken up, you find that there is a need for them to live in separate residences. And now they
This is
hate each other. And now they want to bring each other to court for divorce and all other aspects that can actually arise. Maintenance, the
yeah.
issue of property, and the
Yes.
issue of children, you know, and you find that it can be such a difficult situation for both of them because emotions are also involved. And sometimes you
Yeah.
find that even rationality leaves the house where people are engaged in those things. And I think in a nutshell, that is exactly what we want to deal with. And of course, we need to try to structure it to some extent so that we are not all over the place. And perhaps
This
maybe
is
I
true.
think some of the questions that came up, they might assist us to really
Deal
try
with
to
that.
structure our discussion
Absolutely.
so that we can actually have
Yeah.
it in a more structured manner.
100%. And thanks for that. And Juanita, I managed to pin this topic as you said, and thanks for that tip. It's now pinned. Dita has asked that we save it. Definitely it will be on my IGTV. We'll also just try and create some links on it. But Clement, let's deal also with the practical aspects and what often happens, amongst other things. And I'll just give you an example, and we can talk through that as an example. So you have a young couple, for example, who are in love, and they are head over heels with each other. And what subsequently then happens is they go to Home Affairs, because maybe the family would probably either say, hey, not now, you are not ready, but these people are so much in love, and they go kwamuhle, as they would call it, and then get a certificate, marriage officer, commissioner, and then they're married. Fast forward 2-3 years later, things don't work out, and subsequently they then have to part ways. And the gentleman, for his sins, he wants to get into business and do other things, even maybe before even parting ways. Suddenly, the gentleman, while it's the honeymoon phase, wants to get into business, and one of the partners says, Chief, you are now going to be a director. We know that you are married, and what is the type of marriage you are in, for example. So if you could just explain the type of marriages. I mean, this one, as I said, they go in, they sign, but ordinarily there's also the Tsawatswana or traditional marriages, and those come with consequences. So if you could just explain those consequences associated with this regime called marriage.
That is a quite a useful question, and I usually try to say it in this way: there are types and there are forms. Let me just start with types. There are basically two types of marriages. Usually people say three, but that is not quite correct. There are actually two types of marriage. It's marriage in community of property, community of profit and loss, and marriage out of community of property and out of community of property and loss. But with the second one, there is an extra layer that is called marriage out of community of property, but with the application of the accrual system. So the third one, or rather what I said as the last one, is normally referred to as the third type of marriage, but it's not quite correct. That is just marriage out of community of property. It's just that it comes with an add-on.
Yes.
Now, what basically happens is in South Africa, you have a default position, which is a community of property. If two people in your example go to Home Affairs and they sign, they will be married in community of property, because if you are married, if you get married and you don't conclude an anti-nuptial contract, you will automatically be married in community of property. But if you consult with a special type of an attorney called a notary public, and that person drafts a document, which is a marital document, normally called a prenuptial contract, wherein you state in that contract that, one, you don't want to get into a marriage of community of property, you want to get married out of community of property, and you state it clearly there, then that's fine. That thing has to be taken to the deed registry, it needs to be certified, and it's just a process in itself. But once you have concluded that contract, that means now you are married out of community of property. Or in the very same contract, you can say, look, and community of property means everything that you own belongs to all of you, basically.
And on that, sorry, Clement, and I think it's an important thing. Everything else that you own belongs to both of you, and is like a furniture, for example, or something like that, and then she brings in the car. Are you saying all those things are put into one basket and suddenly kids are really two?
The minute you get married, you reconcile yourself with the fact that you are inviting a co-owner in undivided shares. In other words, whatever you own at whatever time, you're not going to say, this is like, let's say maybe you and I are communicating via electronics. The phone that I'm using to talk to you, it's my phone. And at the time when I get married, I will be inviting my partner to be a co-owner of this phone in undivided shares. In other words, I cannot quantify my share. I cannot say I own 50% or 20%. In actual fact, you both are 100% owners of whatever it is that you bring into the marriage. And I oftentimes hear people say, look, I brought this, I brought that, it doesn't matter. Whatever you bring, which is of patrimonial value, will be yours. So community of property means that community of property. Community is about people. So in the context of marriage, it's about you and the person that you're getting married into. You're getting married to. You are actually a community in terms of the assets that you have in the marriage. So that is the default position. If you don't conclude an anti-nuptial contract, automatically, I often hear priests when they preside over marriages, they ask the people that they are that are getting married whether they want to get married in community of property or not. That is not the place to decide that. That's very interesting. Even if one of the parties can say, no, I want to get out of community of property, the mere fact that you are concluding the marriage and you are going to sign when there is no anti-nuptial contract, that means you are married in community of property.
Thank you for that. So Clement, and thanks for that. I like that, and the issue of jointly owning and all of that. But now someone just put a very nice and interesting thing is, and does that include the problems, amachala and debts associated with that, for example, just before we move on and basically talk of what is an anti-nuptial, for example?
Remember what I said community of property, community of profit and loss. Profit are all those assets. Losses are the liabilities. So you carry the good and you carry the bad. So you are going to be a joint owner of all the liabilities that the person comes with, even before you got married. The time you get married and the default position applies, you guys are going to be one in terms of good and in terms of bad.
So I guess in sickness and health would come in here as
exactly it,
amongst other things. But thanks for that. And I'm noting this insofar as clearly this thing is quite serious, being married in community of property, for example, right? And there's also out of community of property, which you touched on briefly. But if you could just go. Unless maybe before you even move out, is there anything else associated with marriages in community of property, for example?
All I can say is marriages in community of property are not a bad thing per se. I mean, I've seen a trend now where people are trying to say, look, marriages in community of property are bad. No, they are not bad per se. They are only bad in relation to your intentions as a person.
Correct.
And your life structure. I wouldn't advise anyone who is about to get into businesses to get into that type of marriage, because businesses, you never know, they have their life of their own. So you don't want to drag somebody with you, the person who should actually take you out when you are dragged in. So you don't want to have something like that. So if you're going to get into business and stuff, but if you're going to be to have a normal job and you're going to work and there's no business and all those things, I don't think it is necessarily a bad thing. Our parents survived based on that kind of marriage, and it cannot necessarily out of the blue become a bad thing. It is just that your intentions and your attitudes towards life, it makes it bad. Because there are people who get into marriage because of what people have, then it makes it bad. But if you get into marriage because of growth, if you get into marriage because you want to grow and you want to have a life partner, it is not necessarily a bad thing. But if you're going to get into business, certainly it's not advisable.
Yeah, and thanks for that. So basically, the lesson in terms of marriages in community of property, amongst other things, is you need to do your KYC, know your client, or in this case, KYP, which is know your partner, and have that. So just don't wake up, go home affairs and sign. Ask about what are your dreams, what are your ambitions, and is this what you want, and stuff like that, because you may well find yourself entangled, as they would say, in this type of process, amongst other things.
People are always, especially guys, they are always afraid of bringing these issues out, because the minute you bring them out, the other person will be saying, but you don't love me. You know, and the ladies who are making it also, they are starting to behave like generally the way men will behave. In trying to, because they want to bring the topic, but they are afraid to bring the topic because now they are afraid that the men will say, oh, now you are making money, you don't trust me. It's not a question of trust. It's not a question of trust. But I mean, why would you marry somebody that you don't trust in any event?
Yeah.
You know, why would you do that? But it's not a question of trust. It's really about managing your life and ensuring that you preempt some of the things that may or may not happen. So you need to really, like you said, you need to really know the person. You need to know what they are into, the businesses that they are part of, or the risks generally that they take. Because sometimes you might not necessarily be in business, but you might be dating a gambler, a habitual gambler. And that might actually also get you into trouble. So you need to really know the person that you are dating before you take that leap of faith.
100%. And thanks for that. I like the part that sometimes you don't know the person that you are dating, amongst other things, and this person really will take you to the cleaners, and it becomes a problem. And I've seen, and we've noted this question insofar as, can you change a marriage that is in community to out of community? Before we answer that, and we'll get to the Q&A, let's just touch on briefly marriages out of community of property. What is this thing that we always hear?
Marriage out of community of property, it is just the opposite of marriage in community of property.
Yeah.
That means whatever you bring into the marriage belongs to you. You retain your personal estate, and whatever you own prior or during the marriage would belong to you. So you don't have to share that. Should the parties divorce, you don't have to share that with the other person. So it is just straightforward, just like that. But it does not necessarily mean that when you divorce, the other party cannot ask for maintenance from you. The contract of marriage brings with it duty of support, which is a common law duty. So even though you might be married out of community, it can also be complicated when you divorce, because the other party can also derive the right to request the standard of living that he or she enjoyed during the marriage. So depending on the thing that you go to, there might be other complications that you might want to attend to. But on just a level basis, it is just simply whatever you own, whatever I own belongs to us separately. We don't jointly own any. There's no joint estate that is created between us. We retain our separate estates. And again, if you are in business and business goes down, I'm not going to be to be included in the product. For instance, if you are to be sequestrated, for instance, even though the trustee will take my estate and look into it, but I can actually recover it from the trustee because I'm not married in community of property. So those are just some of the things that will really apply in relation to community of property. Out of community of property with the accrual system is the best of both worlds.
What is this accrual system as you describe it as the best
accrual is just
of both worlds?
It is just a fancy word of lawyers just to say growth.
Okay.
Basically, it means growth.
Yeah.
In other words, before you get married, it is out of community of property.
Yeah.
The day you get married, it is in disguised community of property. In other words, at the time the antenuptial contract is concluded, you need to state in the contract that I don't want the car to be part of the growth of this marriage. I don't want the house to be part of the growth of this marriage. You need to list all the items that you don't want to be part of the growth of the marriage. And everything that you left.
Yeah. But can you list things that, you have an agreement with your partner, but things that you most likely will acquire as part of that? Does it make provision for potential things that you'd want to acquire, or is what I have now, I don't want it to be part of the marriage?
No, you cannot put things that you will acquire, because that will be the clear definition of growth in the marriage. If you acquire things while you are married, the assumption is the environment that you are in with your person is allowing you to acquire those things. So it's 100%. Part of the growth of the marriage. Okay. So you cannot include those things. You can only include the things that you have at the time of the marriage.
Right. Okay. All right. Makes sense.
Now,
thanks for that.
Yeah. Once the marriage has been concluded, everything else will be fine up until you divorce. Mm-hmm. At the time of divorce, that's when the accrual system will come in, where it will say, let us look at your marriage. Let us look at your antenuptial contract and see whether there are items that you have actually listed there as not part of the growth. If there are, then they will be put aside. Then they will say, look, let's look at the items that you acquired during the marriage. And if all those assets, they will put here. You are not, because it is not community of property. It's not like you are joint owners of all those things. Now, the law looks at the two spouses. It will look at whether between the two of them, is there anyone who his or her personal estate shows a lesser growth. In other words, it has not accumulated to the extent of the other one. And the law will also look at the other one and say, but is there anyone amongst these two people whose estate has grown over and above the other? So in other words, at the time of divorce, the court will look at who between the spouses has a lesser estate. If they have the same estates, let's say maybe the estate amounts to 2 million and 2 million, the accrual will not apply because both of them are on the same level. But if there is a cent short, that means another one's estate is lesser than the other. So the one with a lesser estate will develop a right to obtain the difference between the joint estate. In other words, the two estates will be combined and will be divided into half. The difference thereof, the other party will get that. In simple terms, that will be community of property.
I see. All right. That's a very, it just tells you that it's not an easy thing, right? And it's very important that people, over and above these questions, which really, as we said, we are not giving legal advice here, that you have to consult and make sure that your estate planning, amongst other things, is in order. We are also noting some of your questions in terms of spousal support after divorce and what it means and stuff. So we've touched on in community, we've touched out of, and we also dealt with issues of accrual, amongst other things. So say I get married traditionally with my wife, and it's a traditional wedding, and we display everything and Instagram it, and everyone knows about it and stuff. And then later I realized that, hey man, I'm making money from Instagram and Twitter and other things. And then I'm like, I need to go see Clement or a notary, and I need an antenuptial contract. The question then is, does that mean that, and we sign it subsequently? I mean, I speak to my wife, she says, no, why not, baby? I love you. This is now, I understand what you're saying here. Does that mean that now the marital regime has changed to one where there's an accrual, or, because we displayed it to everyone, amongst other things, we will be bound by the initial consequence?
There is a legislation that deals precisely with that, the Matrimonial Property Act, which allows parties post their marriage, not post their marriage, during their marriage, to actually, who have concluded an anti-mutual contract, to actually approach the court and make an application to change their marital regime. It is loosely referred to as the post-nuptial contract.
Yeah.
But basically, it's just an application to court wherein the parties jointly, not one of the parties. You cannot, let's like give you an example, the guy who's making money on Instagram and all whatever, and say, look, I think I'm bowling now. It is time for me to go to court or to change the matrimonial unilaterally. You won't do that. It needs to be a joint thing. Because now what will happen is if you are doing it unilaterally, you are prejudicing your spouse's interest in the joint estate. Yeah. But over and above that, there are creditors as well. There are people that you may owe and all those things who might stand to benefit should you sequestrate it. So if you unilaterally do all these things, you might interfere with their interests in your joint estate. So what will happen is you will need to notify all your creditors that, look, I'm making an application to, or we are making an application to court. We want to change our matrimonial regime. There must be a sound reason why. You need to convince the court. The court has a discretion to reject the application. So it's not like you just wake up and say, no, I want to change this thing. There must be, that's why it is important that before you get married, you get everything right. Because if you don't get everything right in relation to what you are wishing for, things might be a little bit murky after you got married. So in principle, it is possible to change the marital regime, but it's a little bit harder.
100%. Thanks for that, Clement. And I think it answers some of the questions that were asked amongst other things. So yes, you can change it, and this is what it means. But now going back to that example, so in short, I've gotten married as long as I have consent from my wife, and also notify the creditors that's possible. But it's not as easy as it is amongst other things. We then often, when I want to change marriage or something like that, or I want out all of a sudden, I want to suddenly, I'm not going to obtain consent from my wife. Can you then compel your wife to provide or give that consent and say that, they're prejudicing you by not granting that type of consent?
No, look, practically you can, because you can instruct somebody to do that. But as whether it will fly, it's another thing.
Something else.
Because practically you can. But the thing is, you need to have sound reason. And of course, if you're going to say, look, I want to change, but my wife doesn't want to change. Now the question will be, why don't you just divorce? Because perhaps maybe now your path, or you're not in the same path anymore from a financial point of view. You have different perspectives as to what needs to happen with the assets of the estate. Perhaps the question would be, why don't you just divorce? But as far as I would think, because I mean, in law, everything is possible to me. I would think that if you make a strong enough case why you would want to change and why your wife is unreasonable, because the court can actually grant some of these things. But you really, but I don't see it happening. But I'm just thinking that, look, in South Africa, anything is possible.
Yeah. All right. So, Clement, one of the things, and maybe this is an opportunity now just to deal with some of the questions. But if there's anything maybe on your end that you want to just close it out on just here, and then we can deal with the 4 or 5 questions that we've got on Twitter and on Instagram and some on Facebook, and then also some that we are seeing here on the IG Live, amongst other things. Is there something maybe that you just want to emphasize or touch on, and then we can deal with some of these questions that are practical and applicable to some people as well?
I think it's very much important to note that there's no better marital regime. I often hear people say, look, we want to do this because we want to protect ourselves. There's no better marital regime. Each and every marital regime comes with its own challenges. So if somebody would ask me, but which one should I go for? I often try not to answer that question because people live different lives. And what one marital regime might work for another person and not necessarily for the other person. Like I said, and I want to emphasize, it's always important to know your partner, understand your journeys, understand what you are trying to achieve, and speak to each other. If you want to get into but if you're going to say out of community of property it's better than community of property, you will get shocked when you get divorced, when all these technicalities arise, which you thought you were going to avoid with out of community of property. There was a case that was decided in the Supreme Court of Appeal. We call it an ST case. It dealt with a very wealthy guy who was an advocate, a senior counsel, who married some newly appointed, I don't quite remember, was a attorney or advocate, but he was quite a junior in the field. This guy concluded an anti-mutual contract, included everything that you would want to include to protect yourself as an advocate.
Of course.
I would tell you, to me, this case went all the way to the Supreme Court of Appeal, where issues of maintenance came in, issues of living annuities came in. All these things, which one would have thought by signing an anti-nuptial contract, you are going to protect yourself from. And ultimately, the wife was able to salvage something from the marriage, notwithstanding the fact that they were married in community of property. So the point that I'm trying to make is each and every marital regime or matrimonial property regime has its own challenges. And when you divorce, that's when you'll get to know of them in relation to your specific situation.
100%. Thanks for that. I think it emphasizes the fact that, you know, and it's very unfortunate, right, that the access to court or a legal system is expensive. But as simply Momo says, kudos to that queen. She must get her coins, you know, from the senior counsel and stuff. But Sebi has asked one interesting question on these type of marriages before we get to the question that lobola was paid, but there was no celebration of some sort, right? And there was no display or Instagram as you were. Does that then constitute a marriage?
To me, I think this is an important question, and answering it directly, we won't do justice to it. Let me just go back to when I started. I said there are types of marriages and there are forms of marriages.
Correct.
When I started, we dealt with types of marriages, what I usually call forms of marriages in South Africa. You have civil marriages, which we have just spoken about now. Then you have customary marriages, which we have just spoken about. And you have an act, the Civil Union Act, which allows people who want to get in some form of a partnership or a union to get in. And this is the act that normally allows people who are of the same sex to get into these kinds of relationships. So those are the only three recognized unions in South Africa: civil marriage, customary marriage, and civil unions. Now, Muslim marriages are not covered in, Hindu marriages are not, and there's currently a process in the South African Law Reform Commission wherein we are investigating how these other types of marriages can actually be included and legal protection can actually be provided to them. And of course, we know also that there are issues of cohabitation and all those things. But now, in relation to customary marriages, you have what we call in customary law, living customary law. Living customary law is the kind of law that is uncodified. In other words, you cannot find it in statutes. But certain books and certain articles, they will refer to it. But these are practices of community members that have been developed over time. And those particular communities, they understand those practices and they try to stick to it. And this is important, and you will see why later on. Then you have official customary law. Official customary law is codified law. Like, for instance, Recognition of Customary Marriages Act. That is the law that deals with customary marriages. So it's part of official customary law. So now, in terms of that law, Recognition of Customary Marriages Act, there are only two requirements that must be met in order for a person to be married. And I just want to make sure that I get this right. When you look at the act itself, it requires, one, the person must be of a certain age in order to consent. That will be one of the most important requirements. Two, the marriage must either be celebrated or negotiated in terms of customary law. Those are the requirements of a valid marriage. Lobola is not an official requirement of a marriage. In other words, whether or not you entered into, or you negotiate, whether or not lobola was paid, does not actually carry much of a weight in as far as the customary marriages are concerned. But it gets a little bit complicated, because people always say, but when you are saying that the marriage must be negotiated, what is usually negotiated? Because customary marriages, negotiations, usually, they are for lobola.
This is true.
So in that sense, it becomes an unofficial requirement for marriage. But now it gets a little bit difficult as well, because sometimes people negotiate and they speak about lobola, and some guys, they pay half or they don't pay, they promise to pay at whatever time. Now the question will be, under those circumstances, has marriage taken place? The answer is yes. If there is evidence that 18 and above, the parties were 18 and above, they gave consent, and if it is shown that there was celebration, that's enough. Because negotiation is all. It's not celebration and negotiation. It is celebration or negotiation. So if the parties can demonstrate that there was some form of celebration, usually they slaughter things and all those things, that those ceremonies took place, then the marriage will be regarded as valid. Now, there is this issue that has really caused a lot of pain in relation to the jurisprudence relating to customary marriages, where people have been asking that, you see that when, especially when somebody has died, the family of the man will always say, but there was no marriage here because the bride was not officially handed over to the family. And you find that a lot of cases, previous cases, when this requirement, which is a living customary law requirement, not the requirement in terms of the act, but the requirement in terms of the practices of the people. So now, it has been shown that when this requirement has not been met, there are a lot of cases that says customary marriage has not been entered into, regardless of the fact that the requirements in the Recognition Act have been complied with. But the problem we are having in South Africa is there are so many customary marriages cases that are contradictory. One would be, and I think a lot of people here will remember the WHP case. That is one of the cases that really, to some extent, tried to muddy the water, if you like. Because in that particular court judgment, said, look, the fact that the wife was not...
You are breaking. Can you hear me? Clement, can you guys see us? Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you properly.
Yeah, you keep breaking.
Can you hear me?
Okay, cool. You can continue. Yeah.
I think I'm still live.
I just have someone at my gate.
Okay, no, it's fine. I'll
Please
try to
continue,
continue in the
Clement.
meantime. Yes. So that's how normally it happens. And you find that in that particular judgment, Mokwatleng raised some of the most important issues, that there are gender issues in relation to that requirement. That usually it is a requirement that is used to prejudice women. In a sense that when the family of the husband will come in and say, but look, the woman was not handed over, so there's no marriage, because they don't want the wife to get their due and all those things. And when this case was taken on appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal, sadly, the Supreme Court of Appeal, it provided a judgment which did not deal with some of the issues that the High Court dealt with. So the law in relation to customary marriages, it is really difficult to understand. There's no certainty in it. But what I can say is marriages that are entered into in customary format, those marriages are the same as marriages that are entered into in civil format. There are no differences, none whatsoever. The requirement, the community of property is still applicable, out of community of property is still applicable, the accrual system is still applicable. So even if you are going to enter into a marriage, in customary marriage, you still need to comply with the requirements of the Matrimonial Property Act. And if you enter into an antinuptial contract, the same requirements will be applicable, notwithstanding the fact that it is a customary marriage. So the fact that it's a customary marriage, it does not change those kind of types of marriages that we spoke about earlier on.
100%. Thanks, Clement. I mean, and I'm also seeing differing views on the comments. One of it was, are you saying that lobola is not? So what? Where's this thing on that lobola thing? Simply, Momo, can you just put your question up on lobola and what you're asking? I seem to have missed it there, and you can do that. I see it's 10:07 now, and literally this has been more of a discussion between us, and I would like just for us to just speak quickly and address some of these questions that have came in. And before we even do that, I just want Clement to just reassure the people who've tuned in here that earlier we had a discussion, and because of the importance of this topic and family law and matrimony law, what we'll be doing in August as part of our Women's Month initiative.
Oh, sorry to me. I think the question is there. Is lobola not a requirement for a customary marriage? The simple answer there is yes, it's not. It's not a requirement for customary marriage at all. But there are nuances to it. Like I said, when you look at Section 2 of the Recognition Act, in that act, you won't see the word lobola at all. It doesn't appear. But you will find the word negotiation. So a lot of scholars have used the word negotiation to say indirectly that entails that lobola is a requirement for customary marriage. But the fact that you did not conclude lobola and all those things does not invalidate the marriage.
100%. I've got an indication that the live is going to cut at 55 minutes. It's going to start counting. Please just save it before it does. I just want to see, Juanita, please also just drop an Instagram hint as to how can one save this live before it disconnects as soon as possible. But having said that, amongst other things, and I like this type of debate, right? Because it is key and it's going to be important. But I was about to make an announcement insofar as this type of content is concerned. As part of our Women's Month initiative and also just empowering, as one does at times, we are going to have a family law series for the entire August, amongst other things. And that includes focusing or having focused topics. So maybe say next week, Thursday, we can focus on maintenance. And then, for example, that other Thursday, we could probably work on custody or maintenance and custody and stuff. So Clement and I will be sitting and coming up, and then we'll put up a poster and just explain to you guys that this is the series and the dates, and this is what we'll be doing, amongst other things, because in the interest of time in what we are doing, we will then do our part insofar as making sure that we meet up here on Thursdays, and then we also just discuss your maintenance issue. Can you return lobola, for example, and claim a refund, amongst other things? Lobola being paid half, and then what happens? How does maintenance get decided? For example, I haven't seen my son or daughter in ages, and my wife is now married elsewhere. Do I have a duty of support? What does it look like, and stuff like that? So my sense is, I think it's best that we pause. We will come and then say, this is what we are going to do. But Juanita has proposed something very important so that we can close it. Let's end this live now. I'll do another one so that it's part 2 of that, and then we can conclude nicely and do a nice summary. So I'm just going to end this, save it, and then come back again just for us to close it out properly.
All right, no problem.
See you soon. Thanks.